Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a large pattern change that'll be bringing a massive heat wave to the United States, including potentially one of the highest temperatures ever recorded on Earth in the United States. And we'll also be discussing the severe weather potential over the next several days and what trend it's heading toward. Is this going to continue to increase as we've seen recently, or will we start to see a break? I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll first begin with the eastern half of the United States. That is where we still have some showers and storms out there today. We've seen a lot of rain, obviously, over the past 24 hours. Those in the Midwest, we saw a small-scale little severe weather event last night with a tornado and damaging winds as high as 90 miles per hour at one point. And now that activity is shifting off to the east, where we have another chance for severe weather later today across areas in the Ohio Valley and the Northeast, where we might see some damaging winds, perhaps some large hail, and maybe even a couple tornadoes as well as that activity continues to move off to the east. And that's all associated with this very large scale trough that has been sitting in southern Canada for multiple days now. I mean, it's barely moved, literally. It's still sitting there back up in Canada. It has a very clear spin as well, so it's obviously there as a low pressure system, and that's continuing to set off a few little systems, bring some showers and storms to areas now in the Northeast. Behind all this, there's drier and as well as some cooler air, not really much cooler, but we are seeing high temperatures dropping a bit into the 70s and 80s in many areas, and some stronger wind gusts as well right behind that. For those in the southern plains, we've been watching some showers and storms as well during the late morning and now going into the early afternoon. That will continue to kind of simmer down there into the southern plains, continuing with some showers and storms, but nothing that crazy there overall. And then back over on the western half of the United States, there's hardly a single cloud, and it is extremely hot over there. In addition to that, there is really no rainfall over the past several days, which leads into our topic of discussion for this forecast, which is the massive heat dome that'll be impacting the United States over the next several days. It'll continue to move into areas like the Great Plains, perhaps even into the eastern tier of the United States. So this heat will continue to build up here across a large chunk of the United States. So let's discuss that more in detail, beginning with our jet stream. And the jet stream is literally what controls the weather patterns here in the United States. And you'll notice this is where the strongest upper level winds are. That's where our jet stream is located. It's turned in from a zonal jet stream into more of a meridional jet stream, and that means it's a little bit more curvature to it, basically. Back up in Canada, that's where we have that very dominant trough that's been sitting there again for days on end. And then our relentless heat wave that's ongoing in the southwest United States is all responsible because of the heat dome that we have down there. Which, by the way, I've had people ask me, what is a heat dome? A heat dome is essentially just a ridge dominating with a ton of heat. There's no really big fancy terminology to it. That's what I mean by that. Now, as we go throughout the next several days into the early week, the jet stream really, again, becomes very curvatured, and that is, again, a meridional jet stream that we're looking at. Back down in the southwest United States, that is where our heat dome still remains. Very strong heat dome. Again, it is a very massive ridge down there. Back over into areas like the northern Midwest, that's where we'll have a trough start to dip down to the south and east. That does not mean we're going to see severe weather imminent in the Midwest, but we will have a chance for severe weather back down into areas in the Northeast. But the overall risk of that does remain low at this time. And then once we go throughout the early week, we'll continue to see a very active jet stream, very strong jet stream, by the way. Once we see those pink colors and purples on the map, that indicates very strong upper level winds. So we have a fairly strong jet stream in much of the country, especially back over into the Northeast. But once we get closer to Tuesday into Wednesday, notice where the heat dome is now. It's actually going to be located more closer to Texas in the upper levels. That will start to create some havoc there with much warmer temperatures starting to increase in this area. We could see high temperatures get into the mid 100s, as in like 105, 110 degrees in some of these areas, which is very hot for Texas, by the way. Usually during this time of the year, the average high is around 95-ish, depending on where you are. So very hot weather there. We start to go back to a zonal jet stream for the most part going into mid next week, but we'll watch a trough back up into southern Canada. This could actually increase the risk for severe weather in the Midwest. I don't foresee right now a severe weather outbreak out of this, but we could at least see some severe weather out of that sort of event. And then once we get closer to Thursday into Friday, that heat dome starts to just sit there in the southern plains, and that is going to continue to increase the risk for heat and as well as the threat for heat sickness, which means you could see heat stroke and as well as other heat illnesses. So make sure you are limiting your time outdoors, and if you have respiratory issues, you should limit your time outdoors as well, especially during this time of the year as the heat just continues to ramp up. Now, overall, the watches and warnings across the United States, we have a ton of heat advisories today for those in the southern plains and as well as near the Gulf Coast, and as well as back through areas in the western half of the United States. We have many excessive heat warnings in effect for those in Arizona, Nevada, and as well as California. Which, speaking about California, if you haven't already heard, Death Valley is currently forecasted to reach a high temperature on Sunday of 130 degrees. That is extremely hot. hot. The hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth was about 134 degrees back in 1913 in Death Valley. That record could be close to being challenged on Sunday. And also going to Sunday night, it doesn't get any better. The low temperature is 101 degrees. That is the temperature for a high temperature back over in areas like Dallas, Fort Worth recently. That is unbelievable how hot it'll be in those areas. And even going into Monday, the forecasted high temperature right now is 128 degrees. It is unbelievable what we'll be seeing there in Death Valley. Here's the forecasted high temperatures for Sunday in California. You'll notice like Fresno, California near 116. Los Angeles near the coast will be 82 degrees because of those cool water temperatures. But back over in Death Valley, you got 128 degrees. That is unbelievable how hot it'll be getting there. Again, that record's being challenged for over 110 years ago. That is quite incredible to say the least. And that is the power of this heat dome that we have here in the United States. Here's the forecasted high temperatures for Sunday across the remainder half of the country. Again, we're not really looking at anything too out of the blue at this point, but a lot of areas in the southern plains back through the southeast, we'll be watching for high temperatures in the 90s, possibly some 100s in Texas. So overall, a little bit cooler because the heat dome will be further to the west. But once we get closer to Tuesday, that heat starts to move further to the east. Cooler weather starts to usher in out of Canada for those in the Midwest, with temperatures dropping to the upper 70s and low 80s for high temperatures. So overall, nice weather there. But for the next several days, we are going to be watching that heat start to move further to the east. So again, as we go into this weekend and into early next week, cooler weather in the Midwest overall, that'll be ushering in behind that trough that we're going to be seeing. So nicer weather in the Midwest. Unfortunately, that heat dome will continue to build over in the Southwest United States. Going closer to Wednesday and Thursday, that heat continues in the southern plains and as well as across the eastern half of the United States. Cooler weather still ongoing though in the northern plains. That's below average temperatures, and again, the red is above average. And then once we get closer to next weekend, that's when things become a bit more uncertain at this point, but it looks like we'll still remain above average for at least the majority of the United States. The Climate Prediction Center is currently forecasting above average temperatures between Thursday of next week until next Monday across the southern plains and as well as the western half of the United States. So again, that heat dome continues to intensify. And then back over in the Midwest and parts of the Northeast, that's where a little bit of below average temperatures are expected behind those, that basically that train of storms that we're seeing right now up that direction. And then once we go into Saturday of next weekend and then into early next week through about July 28th, that's where we're currently expecting above average temperatures across pretty much the entire United States. The only exception to that is basically the Ohio Valley and maybe parts of the Northeast, where it might be a bit cooler due to all the rain that we've been seeing there and also the additional rainfall that'll be coming here over the next several days. And to end this forecast, let's talk about the next 3 days in terms of severe weather. For today, there's currently a marginal risk of severe weather in the Ohio Valley and the Northeast. Damaging winds, large hail, perhaps a couple tornadoes are possible. Back down in the southern plains and as well as back into areas like the high plains, we'll be watching also for some hailstorms and maybe some damaging winds. Going into Sunday, there will be another chance for severe weather, one of which is near the Midwest. This could expand a bit to the north and east towards areas near Chicago, but the threat of severe weather there is going to still remain at a marginal scale. Back into the Northeast, we are watching for another marginal risk of severe weather for damaging winds and perhaps again an isolated large hailstorm. And then back going into Monday, we have another marginal risk of severe weather from South Dakota back through Kansas City. Damaging winds, large hail, the main concerns there. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like the button down below and subscribe if you've not already.